His name is Willie J. Parker, and he's an OBGYN. He's also the author of a new book, Life's Work, all about the joy of being an abortionist. And now he's the subject of a fawning New York Times interview. Parker used to oppose abortion, but now he's for it. Why? The answer isn't really clear, but we're supposed to sympathize with him because he clearly wants to help women. Here is Parker's explanation for his shift from pro-life to pro-abortion. Quote, I had come to a crisis moment regarding a religious understanding that left me unable to help women when I felt deeply for their situation. I needed to convert from a religious understanding that left me paralyzed to act on my deepest sense of connection to one that empowered me to do what I felt to be the right thing. In other words, leave God behind. I have a better system, so go for it. This is actually kind of disgusting to compare the ideological movement from not killing babies to a religious conversion. And the notion that this guy felt bad because he couldn't help women who wanted abortions, and thus abortion had to be correct, that's license to commit all sorts of moral atrocities. You feel bad for the woman whose husband's kind of a jerk, so you go and kill him. But here's the amazing thing. This doctor admits that abortion is a life-ending process. He says, quote, if I thought I was killing a person, I wouldn't do abortions. A fetus is not a person. It is a human entity. So it's a quasi-human, which means that it should have quasi-human rights, even by that logic, no? Not according to Parker. He thinks so long as you're not fully human by his vague definition, you have no rights whatsoever, and you can be killed for the sake of convenience. He says, quote, in the moral scheme of things, I don't hold fetal life and the life of a woman equally. I value them both. But in the precedence of things, when a woman comes to me, I find myself unable to demote her aspirations because of the aspirations that someone else has for the fetus that she's carrying. Again, this is pretty gross. He doesn't value them both. If he did, he'd put some sort of conditions on the termination of what he calls fetal life. Instead, he just says that a woman's desire for a promotion at work outranks some outsider's aspirations for her fetus. But what about the fetus's aspirations? Is the value of a baby's future truly just subjective? What if the baby's already born and the mother wants to kill it? Should an outsider's aspirations for the baby now trump the mother's desire, or no? Parker talks about making abortion easy for women, using his rhetoric to inure women to any sort of emotional struggle. He calls this creepily enough verbicane. Seriously. He then says that elite white women are responsible for people worrying about abortion, and that's, you guessed it, racist. Here's what he says, quote, when women acquiesce to a role determined primarily by their biology of reproduction, even if it's unconsciously, they judge each other for rejecting that primary identity. So if you think that the most essential role for a woman is to procreate, and humanity doesn't go on unless you do that, then anything to interrupt that process is to be counterintuitive or immoral. The biggest insult to the notion there's such a thing as black genocide, as if the people who care about abortion really care about black women and black babies. Well, people who don't want to kill black babies in the womb care more about black babies by definition than Dr. Parker, but when you're talking with the New York Times, it's always convenient to pull the race card. It's also worth noting here that women are not acquiescing to some sort of arbitrarily defined societal role when they talk about the value of motherhood. This is called biology. The perpetuation of the human race occurs because women get pregnant and have babies. To see this as some sort of curse rather than the greatest blessing on the planet makes you kind of a sick human being. Parker finally compares pro-lifers to slavers. He says, people often struggle with why I, as a man, am deeply committed to feminism, reproductive justice, and gender equality. I come from a heritage of people who know what it's like to have your life controlled by somebody else. If Parker really wanted to talk about a working analogy to slavery, he should probably start with what he does every day. Deny the personhood of another human being for convenience and profit, and treat that person instead as property to be discarded. If Parker is truly worried about controlling the lives of others, perhaps he should stop ending them. I'm Ben Shapiro. This is The Ben Shapiro Show. Okay, so here we are. We have a lot to get to today. We have a chock-full mailbag. We'll get to all that. Plus, is Trump fighting with his own Supreme Court nominee? Is Trump trying to use the power of the White House to make people buy Ivanka Trump's stuff? We'll get to that in just one second. But first, we have to say thank you to our advertisers over at Winc. It's spelled W-I-N-C. This is the wine company we've been talking to you about for a while. You go to their website over at trywinc.com, trywinc.com/Ben. And what they do is they give you a sort of survey, what kinds of tastes you like, what kind of tastes you don't, and then they recommend wine for you. So if you know nothing about wine like me, and you want to get a great wine, then you go to trywinc.com/Ben, and then you go through the survey, and they provide you a recommendation for wine that is top-notch. Everybody in the office has had this wine. This is why they're drunk off their butts half the time. And they say that it is really first-class wine. It's also really, really affordable wine. And they send it directly to you, and you go to trywinc.com. It used to be called Club W. Now it's called Winc. So if you've tried Club W, you know how good it is. If not, then go to trywinc.com, WINC.com/Ben. By the way, if you don't like the bottle that they send you, you can try it, and then you can toss it and they'll send you another one if you don't like the bottle and you think that it didn't match what you're looking for. So it's a pretty foolproof guarantee. They have a 100% satisfaction guarantee. Try wink.com/Ben, and you get $20 off if you use the /Ben. So make sure you do that. Lets them know that we sent you, and also make sure that you get that $20 off, which is a couple of wine bottles if you actually use that credit. So $20 off when you go to trywink.com/Ben, and they cover all of the shipping. Okay, so we begin today with Donald Trump, and it's not been a good 24 hours for President Trump. It hasn't. And we'll get to Elizabeth Warren and all of the sexist nonsense coming out of the media in just a second. But it's been a bad 24 hours for Trump because he just can't control himself. And you knew sooner or later this was going to get him in trouble. Turns out it's sooner rather than later, because at the beginning, you can sort of mask his personal deficiencies with the fact that on policy, Trump's been pretty good, right? He picks Gorsuch, he puts out these executive orders that conservatives like, and you think, okay, is it really that big a deal that he mouths off a lot? And to a certain extent, that's true. And then you get a week like this one, where he really hasn't done anything. There haven't been any major executive orders this week. There haven't been any major policy moves this week. It's basically just been Trump talking, and that's most weeks for the president. Most weeks for the president are not replete with action. Most weeks for the president are not filled with executive orders changing the nature of government. Most weeks for the president are the president going back and forth with Congress and the judiciary and making policy behind the scenes and talking a lot. And the talking part of the job is actually kind of important. Unfortunately, this is the part that Trump is not that good at. So we start today with this hubbub that is broken out over Nordstrom. So Nordstrom has decided they're no longer going to carry Ivanka Trump's clothing line. I think this is a jerky move. I do. I think it's a gross move. I think companies that are dumping Ivanka Trump's clothing line are really kind of gross. I don't see why you wouldn't carry a clothing line just because you don't like the politics of a person's father. Even if you don't like the politics of the person, I have kind of problems with the idea that you're not going to stock their clothing line. And Nordstrom said that they made this decision based on performance. They said that the sales of Ivanka Trump products slid in the last half of the year. That's certainly possible. It's possible a lot of people started not buying Ivanka Trump stuff because they didn't like Trump himself. Ivanka Trump's people say this is not true, and so they claim that this was just discrimination, basically. So, look, private businesses have the right to do whatever they want to do with regard to their business. If Ivanka Trump's products are great, then other businesses will stock them, and they will sell, and it will be fine. Do I think Nordstrom is being stupid about this? Yes. Do I think TJ Maxx is being stupid? TJ Maxx has taken all the Ivanka Trump labels off of the racks, and they're now stocking Ivanka Trump stuff kind of alongside all their other stuff. I think that's silly. Do I think that it's ridiculous that, what was it? There's another one. I'm trying to remember. That one of these companies, Neiman Marcus, pulled the Ivanka Trump jewelry. Do I think that's ridiculous and silly? Yes. I don't see what buying a necklace has to do with Ivanka Trump's maternity leave policy or anything else. That said, Trump's reaction is just brainless. It's just brainless. Donald Trump goes on Twitter and he starts tweeting about Nordstrom's. Now, it's not unprecedented for the president to get angry at people for being mad at his daughter. Right? The people were passing around a Harry Truman letter where he went after a critic because Margaret Truman was a performer and somebody didn't like one of her performances, and so he savaged the critic. That's not quite the same thing as what Trump is doing here, because here it actually has an impact on a business. He says, "My daughter Ivanka has been treated so unfairly by Nordstrom. She is a great person, always pushing me to do the right thing. Terrible!" Exclamation point. And then, which is odd, the President of the United States Twitter account actually retweeted that. So the feeling had been Trump's personal Twitter account was going to be for Trumpian nonsense, and the president account was going to be for presidential stuff, and not anymore. Now he's retweeting that sort of stuff. That was not great. Then it got worse. Okay, Sean Spicer comes out, and Sean Spicer starts ranting about Nordstrom. So here is Secretary Spicer.
I think this was less about his family's business and an attack on his daughter. He ran for president. He won. He's leading this country. And I think for people to take out their concern about his actions or his executive orders on members of his family, he has every right to stand up for his family and applaud their business activities, their success. So, look, when it comes to his family, I think he's been very clear how proud he is of what they do and what they've accomplished. And for someone to take out their concern with his policies on a family member of his is not acceptable. And the president has every right as a father to stand up for them.
Okay, he has every right as a father to stand up for them. The question isn't as a father. As a father, what he's doing is fine. As a president, the question is, do you have the right to go out there and start railing on companies because they're not doing business with your daughter anymore? And it's not just that. Kellyanne Conway then goes on national television this morning, and she says openly, I'm going to basically do an advertisement for Ivanka Trump's product, and she says, go buy Ivanka Trump's stuff is what I would tell you. I hate shopping, but I'm going to go get some for myself today. Okay, look. There are plenty of us out here who would say that Nordstrom is doing the wrong thing. There are plenty of us out here who would say, go buy Ivanka's stuff. I actually agree with that. Go buy Ivanka's stuff. That's not the point. The point is this is not something that the White House ought to be doing because this is conflict of interest. You're not supposed to be using the press secretary of the United States or Kellyanne Conway, the senior communications advisor. You're not supposed to be using these people in order to propagate business for your daughter or for your siblings or for yourself. Okay, this is self-dealing, and it isn't good. Under federal law, she may have violated federal law. Under federal law, federal employees are not supposed to use public office for endorsement of any product, service, or enterprise, or for the private gain of friends and relatives. Okay, none of this is any good. Okay, if you want Trump to be good, if you want Trump to have a successful presidency, this sort of nonsense has to stop. And this is not about railing on Trump. This is not about, I don't like Trump. This is about no one should be doing this. Imagine for a second that Hillary Clinton had been elected, and she says, and people said, we're not sending donations to Chelsea anymore. First of all, the right would cheer. Second of all, if she then came out and she said, I want everyone in the country to give money to my foundation, to Chelsea's foundation, I think people would be a little upset, and they'd have a right to be upset. In fact, we spent most of the last election cycle talking about conflicts of interest between the Secretary of State and the Clinton Foundation. To pretend that this doesn't exist when you stick a T by the name is just silly. So this was ridiculous, and Trump shouldn't have engaged himself in this. But that wasn't the only silly thing that happened. Okay, the other silly thing that happened is that Neil Gorsuch, who is the Trump's pick, his excellent pick for the Supreme Court, which I have praised up to wazoo at this point. I've thanked Trump multiple times for it. Gorsuch was asked about Trump attacking the Seattle judge, this district court judge in Washington who put a stay on his executive order. And Gorsuch, according to multiple sources ranging from Richard Blumenthal, Democrat of Connecticut, to Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, who is a Republican, tore into Trump's attacks on the judiciary. So apparently Gorsuch said that he didn't like what Trump was doing. This is what Sasse told Morning Joe this morning. He said, Judge Gorsuch and I actually talked about that, and frankly, he got pretty passionate about it. I asked him about the so-called judges comment, because we don't have so-called judges or so-called presidents or so-called senators, and this is a guy who kind of welled up with some energy, and he said any attack on any of, I think his term to me was brothers or sisters of the robe, is an attack on all judges. According to Blumenthal, Gorsuch called Trump's attacks disheartening and demoralizing. And then Kelly Ayotte, who's the spokesperson for Neil Gorsuch, he said that he finds any criticism of a judge's integrity and independence disheartening and demoralizing. Okay, so we now have three separate sources, including Gorsuch's spokesperson, who said that Gorsuch said he didn't like Trump's attacks on the judiciary. And this is fully within character. It's fully within character for Gorsuch. Gorsuch's first call after his nomination was to Merrick Garland, the guy that Obama picked to fill Scalia's seat, because he has a lot of respect for other members of the judiciary, which I think is probably a good thing. You want the judicial branch to defend itself. You want the executive branch to defend itself. Conflict between the branches is totally fine. And yet, there's this whole contingent of people who now say Gorsuch has to go. Terrible. Well, I don't even know what Gorsuch is doing. So Laura Ingraham, who's just become a joke of a human. I mean, Laura Ingraham, who is a very, very smart human being. She clerked for Clarence Thomas. She knows better than this. Here's what she tweeted out. Judge Gorsuch's comments about Donald Trump's tweets are concerning. Judge Pryor or Hardiman knows better. Doesn't bode well. Doesn't bode well. I missed the part where there's a provision in Article 3 of the Constitution that says you're not allowed to disagree with the president. In fact, it seems to me one of the chief qualifications for being on the Supreme Court is the capacity to disagree with the president when you think that he's wrong or violating his duty. And it's just, this is silly stuff. It's silly stuff. And then Trump, because he can't help himself, the problem is not that Trump attacks. The problem is Trump attacks like an idiot. So Trump then goes on Twitter, and he starts tweeting Senator Richard Blumenthal, who never fought in Vietnam, when he said for years he had major lie, now represents what Judge Gorsuch told him. Chris Cuomo, in his interview with Senator Blumenthal, never asked him about his long-term lie about his brave service in Vietnam. All caps, fake news. So number one, what Blumenthal said wasn't fake news. It was confirmed by Sasse and Ayotte, both of whom were in the room. That has nothing to do with Trump. Trump was not there. He doesn't know. Second of all, when Trump goes after, he went after Chris Cuomo. Now, listen, I'm normally fine with going after Chris Cuomo. I think Chris Cuomo has the IQ of a kumquat, but that doesn't change the fact that Chris Cuomo did actually ask Richard Blumenthal about the military service lie. In fact, that was the very first thing he asked him in the interview. So Trump is just making a fool of himself. And there's no reason for this. It's very frustrating. If you want the policy to be good, and if you want the policy to be followed up by excellent rhetoric and verbiage, and if you don't want the policy undermined by stupidity, then you should be upset about this. Okay, Trump needs to do better. He needs to do better. And if he doesn't do better, he's going to be undermining his own cause. We're going to talk a little bit more about all of that, plus the sort of trust me mentality, and we're going to get to the mailbag, and we have an epic mailbag today, so you're going to want to stick around for that. But first, we have to say thank you to one of our advertisers over at Birch Gold. Oh yes, so if you are interested in purchasing precious metals, if you are interested in investing and diversifying into precious metals, Birch Gold is the place for you. They have a long-standing record of continued success. They have thousands of satisfied clients. They have a bunch of 5-star ratings and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. And right now, they have a 16-page kit, a free kit they'll send you, revealing how gold and silver can protect your savings, and also how you can move your money from your IRA or 401k out of stocks and into precious metals IRA with no tax consequences. So you're going to want to talk to them at www.birchgold.com, birchgold.com/Ben. And you add that /Ben, you get that 16-page free kit, birchgold.com/Ben. Ask all of your questions, make sure you get all of your answers, and then when you're ready to invest in precious metals, which, given all the talk about inflating the currency, might be a good idea at this point, you want to talk to my friends over at birchgold.com/Ben. So final note before we have to leave you on YouTube and Facebook. All of this is problem for Trump, mainly because a lot of what Trump is doing now is reliant on the trust me phenomenon, the trust me philosophy, this idea that if we just trust him, it'll be okay. So Sean Spicer was basically confronted at the White House press conference with the fact that Matt Drudge was saying, what are you guys doing about Obamacare? Because the Republicans haven't touched Obamacare yet. And here was Sean Spicer's response.
I think it's hardly stalling. I think it's a mammoth thing to repeal and replace. I think there's no question the president's commitment to doing this. You've heard Speaker Ryan talk about how we should be able to have this wrapped up by the end of the year. It's a big bill. It got jammed through. And it was very sweeping. And we're talking about 1/5 of our economy. We can either do it quickly, as the Democrats did, and end up with a monstrosity where premiums go up, access is limited, or we can do it right. And I think the president, while he wants to get this done as soon as possible and understand what's at stake, he wants to do it right. He understands how important health care is to American families and individuals. And so his goal is to get it done right and have an outcome that achieves the goals that it sets out to do.
Okay, so all of that sounds fine, but it is really a lot of trust me. People are happy to trust Trump if they feel like he's in control. If he's doing silly things like fighting with his own Supreme Court pick, if he's doing silly things like using the White House in order to promote Ivanka's business, it makes it harder to do the trust me routine a little bit. So we're going to need some more good policy in order to balance out a lot of the bad rhetoric this week. This has not been a good week for President Trump. The last two were good. This one was not. But we'll get to more of that. You'll have to go over to dailywire.com. I want to talk about what the Democrats are doing because that's fully insane. Plus, we have the mailbag coming up, and you can be part of the mailbag if you go to dailywire.com right now and subscribe. $8 a month makes you a subscriber right now. If you want an annual subscription, you spend that same $8 a month, and that will allow you to get a free copy of this terrific DVD of The Arroyo. The Arroyo is a fantastic movie about what's going on our southern border and why the immigration problem is such a problem, the illegal immigration problem, the drug cartels on our southern border. So go over to dailywire.com right now, get that annual subscription, and again, that gives you all sorts of extra benefits. I keep promising the Shapiro store. I do promise. It is coming, and there will be good stuff in it, but you have to go over and subscribe right now. You are otherwise, just go over to iTunes, SoundCloud. You can listen to the rest of this later, and give us a rating on iTunes because we know that you love us. We are the #1 conservative podcast in the nation.